Yo, hello again, everyone. I just wanted to do a little update video on the current status of my hernia and where it's at right now. So I've been getting a lot of questions and comments, people asking for an update on how it's been going, if I've healed the hernia or not. And it makes me realize that this information is really important because I remember when I was trying to do this research and there wasn't a ton of information out there, especially definitive information on whether or not it's possible. So I thought I'd stop in and let everyone know where I'm at. Um, so basically, a little bit of background information before I begin, sort of my lifestyle before getting the hernia. So I've always been very active, doing a lot of different activities from lifting to running, climbing, yoga, calisthenics, martial arts. I mean, you name it, I was the most happy when I was moving and active all the time, right? This has been my lifestyle for, most of my life, especially the past 10 or so years. Um, Specifically, leading up to this point, I was doing a lot of yoga and a lot of lifting and a good amount of martial arts and running as well. So a little bit about my diet leading up to that point as well. I was always very skinny as a teen, so I always had, once I started lifting, I had sort of a, eat big, get big, make gains sort of mindset. Like I had to eat as much as I possibly could to try to put on muscle and gain size. And then, over the years, I started putting on some size, and then a few years ago, I sort of started hearing about intermittent fasting and all of the health benefits associated with that. So I started trying to incorporate that into my life. So I would sort of do like a feast and fast sort of diet. I would fast for 16 or more hours a day, but then when it came time to eat, I would eat and gorge myself and really try to, get all my calories in a very short period of time. So my body got used to getting really, really full and probably having way too much food at one time. And I had been eating this way for, probably several years leading up to this point. So the actual time of getting the hernia back in, I think it was early May of 2021, I wasn't doing anything incredibly strenuous at that time. I was just going for a jog in the park, basically. I didn't feel the tear or notice it happen specifically. I remember just sort of, for whatever reason, maybe I was reaching my pocket or something and noticing a bulge. And, of course, I'd heard about hernias many times with people lifting and whatnot. So I got scared right away thinking that must be what it is. But, I did some research, decided that, maybe it was just a swollen lymph node down there or something, and sort of went into denial, and for a couple weeks just decided it wasn't a hernia and continued doing exactly what I was doing. I remember a couple times like getting in the gym and doing some heavy squats and really starting to feel some pain down there and feeling like it was getting bigger and really bulging more, getting a bit scared. And then I remember going on a really big hike, like going up some really tall mountains and really getting painful and feeling like it was really out more and more and more. So a couple weeks I was still pushing my body, being super active with this hernia in denial until it kept getting worse. Finally, I went into the doctor and, told them about what was going on. I live in Thailand, so I wasn't really able to directly communicate with the doctor too well, but my girlfriend was able to sort of translate the stuff back and forth, and he had me drop my pants and kind of went in and checked it out and said, yeah, it's an early inguinal hernia, indirect on the right side, and I should schedule a surgery, basically. So a couple weeks, I got real depressed, stopped doing anything, thought I couldn't be active whatsoever, sort of laying around on the couch, doing work I could on the computer, and basically planning where I was going to get my surgery, getting the money in order, everything that I was going to do. And then as I began to do research, just, reading about how there could be complications, how if you get that mesh put in there, things could go wrong down the line. You could have to have it replaced potentially in the future several times in your life. So the more I read about it and the more I did research, the more I started to think that this is just not something I wanted to do. And so I decided to start doing research on other ways to heal the hernia. And, I did a ton of research and wasn't able to find much. In the whole vast English internet, there were very, very few sources I was able to find that gave information about healing it naturally. So, I sort of got it into my mind that it was possible and you should avoid surgeries at all costs. And I decided I would give myself 2 months to try my best to just do everything I possibly could. Anything I could find in my research, I would try to sort this thing out. And if that wasn't working out and if it was getting worse, then I would reassess at that time and maybe consider the surgery. So basically, that was when I first started making the videos, right? At that time, I was going and walking in the park often. We had like a little calisthenics park here in Chiang Mai. The gyms were closed during COVID time, so we would do calisthenics and maybe run or walk in the park. And I remember when I first started going, I couldn't walk. It was like a 1 kilometer walking trail, and I could not walk that kilometer without the hernia popping out pretty consistently, you know? So it was pretty miserable going at first. My girlfriend would pretty much work out, and I would sit there and be miserable and try to keep the hernia in. Every time it would come out, I would lay down flat on my back, try to get it to go back in. I would try walking around with, a bit of a pelvic tilt, trying to keep everything tight in there, do anything I could to just try to keep it in. Even doing some pull-ups and push-ups, anything felt like it would make it come out at that time. So I started trying to build my rehab routines, like different exercises and such I would do. I made a video about that, everything I was trying at the time, everything I was able to find on the internet. You could definitely check that out if you want to see some of the research that I did. I think a lot of that was definitely beneficial, but it was very much trial and error, and I didn't really know what was working and what was, not working, basically. Some things maybe could have even been making it worse, and I think, each exercise and each case for each person is going to be different. So, even at different points in my hernia, some things like the leg raises, at some points I thought those were really helping. And then I remember at one point doing them and having my hand on the hernia and feeling it was like one of those, those like squishy balls where you squeeze it and like I remember having my hand there and the hernia was in because I was laying down. And as soon as I started raising my legs up, it just like it was the scariest thing in the world. I was like, oh my God, I just felt my intestine like violently pop out of my body and go back in. So, I think the condition always changes, and obviously everyone's hernia is different. So you just have to find which of those exercises will work for you. But, as I was doing that research, I was able to find a couple of YouTube channels that were beneficial, a couple of websites that were really good that definitely people should check out. But actually, the person who probably had the most beneficial thing was this guy I had found I thought he looked kind of wacky at the time. I said he had like this half mustache, half beard. He was doing these crazy stomach vacuums. And I was just like, well, that's wild. Like, what is that? But as I dove into the research and especially researched sort of yogic techniques and any information I could find with that, that ended up being the most beneficial thing that I began to do. I started with the stomach vacuums and eventually learned about Nauli Kriya, which is where you bring your stomach in and swirl it left and right and move it all around in every direction. And I think that was by far the most beneficial exercise that I was able to use to rehab it. Now, besides the physical exercises, I went really hard on my diet at that time. I gave up all meats, processed sugars, tried not to have any dairy. I stopped drinking and smoking or anything unhealthy entirely. I was doing intermittent fasting every day still, like I had been doing for a while, but I changed my portion sizes. I started eating much smaller meals just so I would be satisfied but not overly stuffed. And I began fasting once a week. Like every Monday would be a complete day of fasting. So I wouldn't eat from Sunday evening all the way to Tuesday afternoon. So it'd be about 40 hours or so each week of fasting, just to try to clean out my intestine and, sort everything out that was going on in there. Because as I was reading and doing information, I started to get the idea that as much as it is a tear that the intestine comes through, that actually may be a symptom of something going on inside your body, inside your gut and in your internal organs. Perhaps all those years of overstuffing myself and eating red meats and I'm not going to pretend to know exactly the cause, but whatever it was, I felt like diet had a lot to do with it. And so when I changed my diet, changed the way I was eating, combined with some of those exercises, I started to have some results. So like I said, for the first few weeks, I was hardly able to even walk for 1 kilometer without the hernia popping out. But I was trying to do everything I could, my exercise routines every morning, changing my diet, changing my habits, complete lifestyle shift. After a couple of weeks, I would start to have periods where I could keep it in. And I don't know whether I was just focusing so much on tightening this area and giving a bit of a, pelvic tilt while I walked and did different things. But I started to be able to keep the hernia in for several hours to even sometimes a day or two at a time. I remember the first time I kept it in for a whole day. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, it's healed. Like it's in, it's done. But of course it would come back out again. And so then for several weeks after that, it was sort of a battle of trying to keep it in as long as I could. And I started to get this idea that if I could keep it in, perhaps the tear would heal up and start to have time to get back together and that tissue could heal. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the idea that I got in my head. So I decided I would do everything I could to sort of keep the hernia in at all times. And so again, sometimes I would have several days at a time where it would stay in and it would come back out for several days. And it would be in and out throughout the day. And I really couldn't tell what was working and what wasn't. I was keeping all the same rules and, dietary changes and exercise routines, but it was real back and forth. And then I remember at one point it was in for like almost a week. I was like, it's cured, it's finished, like it's going to be in for good now. And then I remember going out to a friend's house, had a bit of a party. I was still staying strict, no drinking or anything like that. Just enjoyed some food, hung out. And when I got home, it came out like on the way back. And I was so distraught and so upset that it had come out after like a week of being in. And it was out for almost like a whole week after that. I remember like I could hardly get it to go back in again. And this was after it had gone in for so long. So I was so upset. And then after that week of it being like consistently out, there was a point where then it went back in and didn't come back out. And, this was it was about 2 months, a little less than 2 months from my like 2-month deadline of when I was trying all these things out. So it was probably the end of May that I set these rules and started this routine. So I guess, it was about mid to late July that the hernia went in. And, I wasn't sure if it was going to come back out or not. So, I was cautiously optimistic and I kept up the routines for a while. And as it stayed in, once it was in for several weeks and a month or two, I started to get back to my regular routines. As quickly as I could, I wanted to get back to my yoga practice. So once it was in, or even when it was still coming in and out, I was trying to do a yoga practice, but I would just find which positions made it pop out and avoid those. So like for me, that would be like low lunges, any type of back bends, things like that would always seem to make it pop out. So I would avoid those poses. But once it went in, as quickly as I could, I got back to my practice, which is the Ashtanga primary series. And so I was pretty much just doing that for a while. And after it had been in for, I don't know, a month or two, I started to get back to doing my calisthenics and then getting back to the gym, cautiously getting back to doing squats and deadlifts, very light at first. I remember squats even at first, they didn't feel too good. Back squats didn't feel good, but for some reason, front squats felt better. I felt like I was able to keep it in more, so I got back to doing some front squats, and then eventually I got fully back to lifting, and then Muay Thai and running and everything. And so now at this point, it's been, about 7 months that the hernia has not been out. Completely back to an active lifestyle, doing everything exactly like I would have done before, lifting heavy when I feel the need or the desire, running, doing Muay Thai, everything like it did before, climbing, getting the climbing harness, and it hasn't come out in a very, very long time. So I remain cautiously optimistic that it's healed. However, as much as it hasn't been out and it hasn't been in pain for many months, I do sometimes still feel sensation in that area, especially when I eat a lot of meat, and particularly a lot of red meat. So I kept up the vegetarian diet for about 6 months in total. And then for the past, it was the 2 months of when it was coming out, and then another 4 months or so after that. And then, for the past, 4 months or so, I was dabbling in some meat, and then, sometimes kind of getting back to my old diet. And even just a couple of weeks ago, I noticed when I ate like a big burger, and just like there was one day where I ate particularly a lot of meat, I began feeling like the sensation in the area. Again, not exactly pain. It wasn't painful or anything, but like I can just feel sort of the area where the hernia was. Like I just noticed a feeling there. It's kind of weird. And so, at this point, I'm still doing my Nauli Kriya every morning, or most mornings. Some mornings I forget. You got to do it before you eat. You got to make sure you set that time in your day where you can just sit and be able to do it. So I try to have my morning routine be wake up, drink some water, do my Nauli Kriya for 2 to 5 minutes, and then I do my Ashtanga primary series, my yoga practice, and then, after that I can eat breakfast or lunch usually, and, go about my day as I normally would. But yeah, that's pretty much my story up to this point. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure if it's healed. I don't know if there's still a tear, if perhaps my organs are just healthier and more aligned and less inflamed because of my diet and fasting and different things. If the tear is healed, like I'm not really sure. I haven't been back to a doctor, and I don't really feel a need to go back because I'm living my lifestyle the way I used to and the way I want to, and I feel completely healthy, and the hernia doesn't come out and bother me anymore. So, I'm going to continue doing things the way I do and try to listen to my body. And if I feel that it's going to be an issue again, then I can go back to strict vegetarian diet and getting back to all these routines. But yeah, I just wanted to drop a bit of an update on, the story, my timeline so far, and, let everyone know how it's been. And of course, I've gotten a lot of comments and questions from people who are struggling with the same thing as me. And I do want to say, like, I don't know, from my experience, I'd say it's possible. However, everyone's condition is different. Some people's hernias may be much larger. They may have had them for much longer than me. It could be a different thing that caused the hernia, like who knows. But I think listen to your body. That's what I did in the beginning. I was sort of experimenting with different exercises, different diets, different things. Find what works for you, and just try to stick with it. Like I said, that after it had been in for a week and then it came back out, I was so frustrated and like almost ready to quit and just think about looking at surgeries again, but I stuck with it, and literally just like another week later it went into stay. So stick with it, do your best, and yeah, I wish best of luck for everybody in the community of people who are suffering from this hernia. And really, I think that there needs to be more information out there that you can heal these things naturally, and the way you take care of your bodies and change your lifestyle matter, and surgery is not the only option. So I just hope to get that information out there. And again, take that with a grain of salt. Know that everyone's condition is different. But yeah, best of luck to everybody. Thank you all so much for watching, and best of luck. Peace.